So today is lesson 2, part 1 of Comp2084, the beautiful sunny September day. So what are we doing today? Let's have a look. So we're going to go over this part. First, we're going to go over the semester-long project. I'm going to give you your first assignment, which is due next week. It's very simple, so we'll actually, I think, start with this. We'll then have a little poll. We'll take some and figure out what kind of e-commerce site are we going to build for our in-class lessons. Then we're going to set up the project. We're going to make a controller, and we're going to look at input parameters and controller methods, and then we're going to use a model to mock up some data and look at the flow of how we use our model to generate data, hand that to the controller, and then send that data off to the view so we can render it. So we won't work with our database today. We'll just kind of mock up the database in memory for today. So let's get started. First of all, I want to go over assignment 1. Which you can find under assignments. So let's go and have a look at it. Assignment 1 is incredibly easy. It's going to be due next Sunday at 5 o'clock. This should only take you a few minutes to do. You don't have to write any code. But I want to go over the requirements, make sure everybody understands clearly. So in this course, you're going to be you have 4 assignments, but they're each a different phase of the same project. So you're not going to build 4 separate applications. You're building one application in 4 parts. The first part, which is due next week, is simply a proposal. So all you need to do is complete and submit this one-page document. That's 5% of your grade. Should be pretty easy. Now, before you submit this to me, you first have to go to the project website, which is here, which I actually created with .NET Core. So you're going to come here. You'll click on Choose Your Section. So the idea for this is that within a class, I don't want 2 students building the same kind of project. So everybody will need to submit their own project idea. And when you go to submit your idea, you will be able to see all of the other project ideas in here. So you'll choose your section. Here's our class. And Jarrett's using this site as well. Some of you may be in, I think some of you may be in Jarrett's class, so he'll be using this as well. So you'll go into the Comp2084G Monday section. You'll click View Projects. And so somebody's already submitted. Somebody went ahead and looked at this already. So you'll click Submit Project Idea. You'll put in your email and you'll put in a description of what you want to build. So you can build anything you like. There has to be create, read, update, and delete functionality. That's going to be assignment 2. There'll have to be security, which is assignment 3. And there'll have to be unit testing implementation. That's assignment 4. But you're going to be working on the same project through all these assignments. So once you submit your idea, so I've already gotten one here, the site will send me an email. By default, it will say approved as false. So I get an email notification, then I can go in here. Okay, a social networking site. Sure, so I will approve that. And Jacob will get an email back from the website saying your idea is approved. So this means I don't want anybody else to build a social networking site. That idea has already been taken by Jacob. Okay. So you can build anything you want so long as A, it's not already in the list submitted by one of your classmates, and B, there's one other restriction. You can't build any sort of online store. And the reason for this is we're going to build an online store together in our Monday lessons. So there'll be too much overlap between the work we're going to do together and the work I'm asking you to do independently. So there's no kind of e-commerce project. So what can you build? Where do you get an idea? Well, build anything that interests you. If you play on a sports team, build a site to keep track of the player stats. If you make music, build a library of your songs. You like to keep track of what you're reading, make an inventory of that. You know, your video game high scores on your favorite video game, your latest streaming, whatever is personally interesting to you, or if you think there's actually somebody who might actually use the website. For example, last year I had a student whose family had a business. They managed a business. They bought and sold car parts. So he built an inventory system for them, so they could add parts, edit them, etc. When they came in. So you're free to build anything you like, so long as it's not an online store and it's not the same as what someone else in the class has submitted. I would prefer that you pick your own project because I think it's going to be more interesting for you to build something that you choose rather than just building something that I assign to you. It also reduces the chances of students working together and copying if everyone has to build something different. From my past experience, I found most students like to have a choice and they prefer to get to build whatever it is they're interested in. Some students find this challenging and they say, that's not enough direction for me. I have no idea what to build and I need some help. If you are stuck, please email me and we can have a conversation about it. And I can try to help you come up with a project idea that you are happy with. And that's normal. That couple students will always say, I'm totally at a loss. I have no idea where to go, so give me some direction. And we could talk that through and try to figure out something together that you may want to do. So before you submit this document on D2L, you first have to submit your idea on the project site and get it approved. Okay, that's a good idea. So I like that one, Mason. Okay. So these two ideas are now off the table. Can't build a social media site or a moving rating repository. So once I've approved your idea, then all you need to do for the easy 5% is just complete this one-page document. Put in your name, again, a brief description of your application, explain why you want to do it, why it's useful, and then you can create a Git repository and invite me. And we're actually going to look today at how to do this direct through Visual Studio. In the past, we would go to GitHub, create the repository on the GitHub website. We can actually do this with a couple of clicks from within Visual Studio. So that'll save us some time and some work as well. So this is all you need to submit to me by next Sunday. Ivan, that's fine. You can change your mind, but please send me an email and let me know. Because if you change your mind, I still want to approve the idea. So you don't say, okay, I'm building this. And then when you actually come time to build it, you're going to go build something else. And, so you still need to make sure that I approve the idea. Okay? Excuse me for one sec. I'm dog sitting today. I have puppies who need to go outside, so I have to let them out. They'll come and say hi in just a second. Just got to open my door. Okay, go. Yes, my girlfriend has a 4-year-old and a 3-month-old. And the 3-month-old, it's a long time for her to be at home. My girlfriend's out on the road visiting customers today, so I said, I will bring the puppies with me. They can say hi to the class. So they just had lunch, and lunch means an immediate trip outside. So when they come back in, they'll say hi. So you may hear them wrestling or barking a little bit. Are there any other questions about the assignment? So you'll be using the same repository that you set up for assignment 1. You'll just push all your code for the other 3 assignments into that same repository. Please make sure it's private and make sure you add me as a collaborator. think you all know my GitHub username, but I know it's been 4 months, so here it is. It's IFOTN. No questions? This should be an easy 5%. Yeah, so Megan, assignment 2, which I'll give out next week, is it'll have to have create, read, and update functionality. Okay. So what that data is obviously depends on what you're going to build. So for example, for Mason's movie reviews, right, we'll be able to add movies, add, edit, view, and delete movies, as well as reviews. For Jacobs, he's probably going to have, posts and media files. So yes, there will be a back-end database connection. So for assignment 2, we'll be creating this CRUD functionality. Assignment 3, yes, Ivan. So in assignment 2, we're not going to worry about any security, but we'll be implementing that in assignment 3, where you're controlling who has access and who can do what. And then we'll add in unit testing for assignment 4 towards the end of the semester. So you don't really have to worry about security at this point. You won't have to do that until November. Okay. Sorry, I have to pause my recording. Be right back. Okay, and we're back. So this is Sola, who I have to make sure doesn't go and eat her sister's poop out in the yard, which she hasn't learned yet. She's only 3 months. Okay, you're all good. All right. If other questions, yeah, it's brutal, Samus. You have to watch them like crazy. I let them out, was trying to teach the class, but I had to pause. She hasn't figured out it's not food. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on. If anything else comes to mind today during class, then let me know. Bricks. Well, at least she can't probably eat. At least they can't eat bricks, Megan. All right. Okay, so I will leave the assignment document up in case there are other questions. I think it should be, I've tried to make it as straightforward as I can. Okay, and I am seeing some emails coming in already, so I will approve those as quickly as I can so you can fill out the document and get your easy 5%. Okay, so that was our first, can even see to get an idea, video game review. Sure, yeah, it's good, Andreas. Digital library, yep, sure, deal. Uniforms, that's unique idea. Haven't had that one before. Yeah, music, sure. Yep. Stat tracker for basketball, great idea. And all right, car, yeah, I have that'll work as well. Okay, so all these ideas are workable. So like I said, as long as it's not a store and as long as it's not already in the list, then you'll likely have your idea approved. Okay, so we're going to start in a minute on building our semester project that we're going to do in class. So we're going to build some kind of online store. So before we do that, I'm happy to take suggestions about what kind of store we're going to build together on Mondays. So feel free to make a suggestion in the chat. I'll throw some of the suggestions into a poll and we can have a vote as to what kind of online store we're going to build together. Okay, so we could do books. We could do a mobile shop. Computer parts. We could do video games. All right, I think that's probably, we could do some kind of clothing store. Okay, so so there's the URL. So go ahead and vote. What kind of store are we going to build? If we wind up with a tie, I will cast the tie-breaking vote, because my preference would always be to do something I haven't done before, something we haven't done before in any of my previous classes. I liked it, Mason, but I guess democracy will rule the day. Okay, so it looks like we're going to do books or cars. So I think those are our two leading candidates. So if you voted for computer parts or video games, I want you to change your vote now to either books or cars. We'll have a bit of a runoff vote. So your choices are down to A and E. All right, so it looks like we've got a pretty clear winner. Personally, I'm happy with a bookstore. Just because I've built car stores before in class, never actually done a bookstore. That'll look a little bit different, so maybe we'll let's go with that. Okay, so bookstore. All right, Megan. So you said your suggestion is our winner. All right. So we're going to go ahead and make a new project, and we're going to work with this solution basically the rest of the semester for our in-class lessons. So I'm going to go and create a new project. And we're going to pick all the same options we picked last time. So I can pick from the list of project templates here in this great big list, or even simpler now, Visual Studio shows the recent project templates. So we want this one, the ASP.NET Core Web App Model View Controller. Make sure it says Model View Controller. We don't want this one that just says Core Web App. That's basically just a static site with that only has views. So we want this one that has Core Web App Model View Controller. So just click on that option and click Next. Okay, so we need a name for our bookstore. We're going to need to think of a project name. So what do we want to call this? There'll be no spaces in it. You can call your project anything you like, but we may as well come up with a name because it's going to show up in the header of our site. What are we going to call our .NET bookstore? Oh, that's a good one, Luke. Yeah, I mean, you can use any name you like. Okay, a deal. That's very descriptive. We could go with that. Course code and bookstore. Yeah. All right, Sam, if you're up for it, you got a very good lawyer in the family. We could do that. So you can call your project anything you like. I like Luke's suggestion, so I'm going to call it the last chapter. But I won't put in any spaces because this is the name of the project. So I'm going to use Pascal case and call mine the last chapter. Later on, when we customize the design, we'll maybe come up with a logo for it as well. Color scheme, the whole bit. So I'll click next. And I'm going to pick the same options this week that I picked last week. When you create your project for your assignment, again, you're going to pick the exact same options that we're picking today. So target framework should be .NET 5. Authentication, we want to change. The default option is none. But because, as Ivan asked later on, are we going to have any kind of security? Yes, we are. So we want individual accounts as our authentication type. This will allow us to store users in the database and then work with those user identities for authentication. And we want to configure our site to use SSL. So make sure the configure for HTTPS is checked. So those are the three options. .NET 5, individual accounts, HTTPS enabled. So make sure your screen, you've got the same options as me. You do not need Docker. I would please don't enable Docker. It'll just slow things down for you. We're not going to need it. And just click the create button at the bottom right when your project's ready to go. So this project is going to look exactly like the project we built last week. We have all the same folders. This is just the MVC boilerplate template that we get when we pick this project template. So now I want to get the server launched. I want to load the last chapter in the browser. How do I do that? Anybody remember from last week how we start? Yep. So we click on the debug menu. Thanks, Adil. And we'll click start without debugging. This will compile the site. It will start up a local instance of IIS Express, and it'll load the default view in our browser. We get this warning because we have a self-signed SSL certificate. This is totally secure. This is nothing to worry about. So I'll click advanced. It says the certificate is not trusted because it's self-signed. Well, we got this error last week. We don't care. Self-signed SSL certificate from within Visual Studio is fine. So I am going to click accept the risk and continue. This will add this domain to our browser's kind of safe list, so we won't get this warning again. So we get the exact same project template we had before. We get a privacy policy. We get register and login pages. We get Bootstrap, mobile, jQuery, all baked right into our template. Okay. So we want to change a few things here. First of all, let's rewrite this so that there's actually spaces. It just copies the project name. So for the name of our project in our file system, we didn't want spaces, but this looks kind of lousy in the header. So what file should we go into if we want to modify the name of the site that appears up at the top of the nav bar? What file do we need to open to change this? Yep, you're right, Austin. We'll go into Views. So in Solution Explorer, we'll go to Views. And then where do we go from here? Okay. Austin, you're actually one step ahead of me. We are going to make changes to home index as well, but that's actually not where the site name is, because notice the site name appears on every page. So rather than this being on the home page, it's actually in our, as Sammy said, it's in the shared layout template, because this is our page template that's inherited by all of the pages, all of the views. So under shared, we've got the underscore layout, and then we see it here on line 14. So it just, Visual Studio just takes the project name that we created and writes it exactly the same way into the nav bar. So on line 14, I'm just going to put in 2 spaces. I'm going to do the same thing actually up here on line 6. This is the title for the browser tab, which is also used by search engines. So again, as far as the public is concerned, our site is called the space last space chapter. So we want to brand it this way. So I've just put in those spaces both on line 6 and on line 14. Once I save those changes, notice the page automatically, it does a hot reload. So I get the spaces up here in the browser title, as well as in my navigation bar, regardless of which page I'm on, because this layout file is shared. Now, Austin, we do want to make changes. You suggested we change home index. We do want to change this as well. So this is kind of the, the boilerplate, the standard text that that Microsoft generates with our new project template. We're going to change this description, and we're going to rewrite the description to describe what this project is. So I'm going to go to Views, Home, and Index. I'm going to change the H1 so it says Welcome to the last chapter. And I'll put in a description of what this site actually is. We're learning ASP.NET for MVC in fall 2021 at Lakehead, Jordan. In Comp2084. So I'll just put a description of what this actually is. So if I go back to my browser now, try to shrink this so we can look at both the code and the browser at the same time. So now our homepage content is updated. Now that I'm looking at it, I also didn't realize we've updated the browser title, we've updated the header, but down here in the footer, we still have the last chapter written this way. So the name of our project gets copied by the template, both to be kind of like the site logo in the nav bar. It also repeats it in the footer, so we want to modify our footer as well. So that's also in our layout file. So I'll go back to shared and layout, and down at the bottom on line 41, I want to rename this to also include spaces so that it's readable. So I'll add the spaces here as well on line 41. Just highlight the change for you. And now again, our footer is updated as well. So we've changed the header and footer in the layout, and we just changed some of the content in the homepage. I think this is fairly simple, but any questions so far? Anybody lost or behind? Maybe you got a laggy computer. It's a header goes first, then the page content. Okay, Megan, excellent question. So when the view gets rendered, we'll look at a couple of things here. Okay, so number one, we have this file here under, actually it's not under shared. Notice it's in the root. So under views, there's this file called view_start. So this is defining the default page template. Now, we can have multiple layout files, and this is common because typically, very often, for example, the administrative area of a website will have a completely different layout than the public area. So when we use this MVC template, by default, it only gives us this one layout file. But let's say we want to make an admin layout file instead. In that case, if we wanted to make an admin layout file, any view that used it, we could just declare here at layout equals. So this would use okay. So if no layout file is specified, this view start automatically gives it the layout file. And if we wanted a view to use a different one, we could specify what that would be. So Megan, I've only half answered your question. I'll show you the other part of the answer. Then within the layout file, we have all this HTML for our header. We've got our navigation bar. Line 35, this render body statement, this is where the content of the individual views gets injected. So whatever content is here will show up inside of this main tag. Now we can make any changes we want to this layout file, but that's how the individual page content gets rendered dynamically. Yes, that's right, because Adil, it is compiled because this is server-side code. So that happens on the server. Megan, have I answered your question clearly? Okay. I'm glad you brought it up. It is a very good question that you raised. So we're probably not going to, in our course, make a separate layout file. But again, if we wanted to, we could. So here would be I could show you a quick example of one. Something like, so here's a public website built with an old version of ASP.NET. So it's got its own public layout. Right? You'll see this wasn't done in MVC, but it still uses a layout template. So all of the public pages use this template. But for the admin panel, we just wanted to use a stripped down, simplified version. So the admin template, this uses a different template. So all of these pages use the admin layout file, whereas the public site uses a separate one. So we can make as many different templates as we want. We can specify one as the default, but then we can assign a different page template to a page that's going to use a different structure, different colors, different CSS, for example. You might even use assign a different layout template dynamically to a page, depending, let's say, on who the user is. If you want to brand, let's say we're building a site and we have different customers from different companies, maybe when somebody from, a company like Canadian Tire logs in, we apply a layout template that has a red and gray color theme because it matches their company colors. Somebody from Royal Bank logs in, then they get a layout file that's blue and yellow because it matches theirs. So we can dynamically, at runtime, we can dynamically assign which layout template a page should use if we wanted to. Okay, so our site's running. We've made a couple simple changes here. So what I want to actually do now is take a couple minutes and show you the GitHub integration within Visual Studio. So all of the code we are going to do in class here forward, it's all going to be in this one repository. Now, I don't have a repository yet for this project. I could go to GitHub and do it, but I actually can create the repository and push the code from within Visual Studio. And this is very easy. So in my Visual Studio, I've already got this little Git changes window here. If you don't see this window, you can turn it on through the View menu. You can click Git changes, and that will give you this little window. So right in here, it gives me the option to create a Git repository inside this project. So I'm going to click that button. So it points to my local file path. Now I'm already authenticated. I've added my GitHub account into Visual Studio. If you don't see this option, if you don't see your GitHub username here, then you should just be able to add your GitHub account here. And it will open up a browser window and ask you to log in and ask whether Visual Studio is allowed to access your GitHub account. You'll only have to do this once. After that, you should be signed in already the same way I am. So it already shows my GitHub username and avatar. It wants to make a repository with the exact same name, which is fine. I'll put in a description. It's Comp2084G Fall 21 in class bookstore. I will make my repository public because obviously everybody in class needs to be able to access it. You can just keep your repositories private. And then all I have to do is click create and push. So it tells me I have 2 outgoing commits. Now it says 0. It shows my GitHub username and my repository name. Now I should be able to go to GitHub and see my project. So here it is, updated 18 seconds ago. Here's the project. And it even includes a Visual Studio git ignore file automatically, so all of our dependencies don't get included in the repository to keep our repository small. So I would recommend for assignment 1, I would recommend you create the project and use Visual Studio to push your code to GitHub, and then it'll generate the repository for you. You can do it the old way where you create the repository here on GitHub first and then connect it through Visual Studio or use the command line, but the way I've just shown is the simplest way to do this. I'll also quickly show how we now push, now that the repository exists, how do we push changes if we make other changes to it? So what I'm going to do in my project link. So I want to add a link to my Git repository in the footer. And then I will push that change with a new commit and push. So what I'm going to do is go to GitHub, grab my repository link. So I'll just copy it to the clipboard. I'm going to go back to the footer in our layout file. and I'm going to add a link to the repository with target equals, oops, equals blank, so it'll open in a new window. So my link will say view source, and it will open a new tab to my GitHub repository. So you can do this. Obviously, you will change the username to be your own GitHub username and whatever repository name you created. It might be called the last chapter. You might have called it something else. So when I look in my project, I've now got this view source link. If I click it, it opens a new browser tab, opens the repository. So I've changed the files. So now I need to commit and push my change to GitHub. So I can go back to my Git changes window, and notice now it shows me there's one change. It says you've modified the layout file. And up here, I get a text box, text area, and it says enter a message, which is required. So I'll say lesson 2, part 1, add GitHub link to footer. I'm going to put a description in of my change. And then if I click this little arrow here, notice it says commit all. But if I choose the next option, it's commit all and push. So this is going to make a new commit with the message you see in the box above. L2/1, add GitHub link to footer. And then it's going to automatically push my changes up to GitHub. So it's initiating the push, successfully pushed. And now if I go back and refresh my repository, before I had 2 commits, and now I have 3 commits, and my latest commit message shows up. So it's very easy as we're working within Visual Studio to make sure we're versioning our code and backing it up to GitHub. So now if my laptop dies, my Visual Studio gets corrupted, I break something in the files, I've already got all the work I've done up to date backed up to GitHub. So you can use the command line instead. You can do things that way. I just find Visual Studio makes this process much easier for us. A couple of clicks to create a repository and push our code. So now you don't need the Git commands, you don't need the command line anymore. So again, I would recommend you do this for your assignment. The easiest way to create the Git repository is make your project using all of the template choices we've made, and then go to Git changes and make a new repository, push it, make it private, grant me access to it, and then include the link down here at the bottom of your assignment. Anybody have any questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then we can move on So we've just made a few static changes. Haven't done anything too complicated. Last week, we took our template and we added a method, an about method, and an about view into our home controller. This week, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to make our own controller. And then we're going to make some views. And then later on, we're going to integrate a model in there as well. So to make a controller, I'm going to go up to my Solution Explorer. We want our controllers, all our controller files to go inside the controllers folder. Should make sense. So to create a new controller, I'm going to right-click my controllers folder in Solution Explorer. I'm going to choose Add Controller. So first we're going to build the logic file, then we're going to build a view, and then we're going to add a link into our navbar so that we can load that new view. So I'm going to click Controller. We've got three options here. For this week, we're going to work with this empty controller. Starting in a couple of weeks and in your assignment, we'll be actually using these controllers. And these controllers, there's MVC controller with views using Entity Framework. These have a bunch of pre-built functional code for doing create, read, update, delete, and list. So this is what you're going to use in your assignment. Visual Studio is basically going to write most of the code for you. You have to write very little of it on your own. And this Entity Framework, does anybody know what this is? You guys may have worked with it briefly in your C# course. What's Entity Framework? We'll talk more about it in a couple of weeks, but I imagine you have seen it briefly before. Anybody remember what Entity Framework is? Okay, well, we will come back to it in a couple of weeks. We don't really need it for today. For today, yeah, Chris, it's the default data access library that .NET uses. So in our PHP class, we use the PDO library, right? We were creating new PDO objects in our PHP code in order to connect to and interact with a MySQL database. So Entity Framework is sort of the .NET equivalent, although it's more powerful. We'll look at it more carefully in a couple weeks, but it's the library that we use for .NET to talk to a data source. So in a couple weeks and in your assignment, we'll use controller with views using Entity Framework. For today, we're just going to build an empty controller. So click MVC controller, empty, and click Add. Now, the naming convention is important, and we actually get a tip up here. It requires controller names to be suffixed with the word controller. Two other things to note about the naming convention. One, it uses Pascal case, so it should start with a capital letter. And two, the word that comes in front of controller is typically plural. So I'm going to call this categories controller. Now we can add the extension .cs, but it's implied, it's the default. So I'm just going to leave it out. Visual Studio will automatically give this file a CS extension. So call it categories controller as a plural. In Pascal case, so each word is capitalized to start. And click the Add button. So we get a very simple file. It's in the controller's namespace because it's inside the controllers folder. Our class inherits from the base MVC controller class, and we get this default method here called index. So let's try this out. If I go to localhost/categories, we get this. The view index wasn't found. Why did we get this at this URL? what is this error telling us and how do we fix it? Megan, you're close.
But it's because we haven't added that return view index function.
We have actually. So we have the method and the code is in here. So Megan, you're close. It's not categories.cshtml. Which view is it looking for? What's the name? So the error is actually telling us what file we need to create. Right. We need to create an index view inside of views and categories. So we'll do that quickly, and this error should go away. So the easiest way to do this, if we just right-click the name of our method and choose Add View, we'll pick Razor View Empty and to add. We'll just call it index because that matches the name of our method. And I'll just put on a heading here that says Shop Our Store. So this should make the error go away now. So our categories index method got called, but there was no view. We've now created, under views and categories, we've now created an index view. So if we go back to the browser, right, now it works. And the index is implied, so it doesn't matter. We don't need the word index in the URL. It works with or without it. Okay, so similar to what we did last week, but last week we were doing this in the home controller that Visual Studio gave us. We're now defining our own controller. This file will be used for managing all the categories in our bookstore. It comes with an in default method called index. So now we've made a view with the same name. So this URL now loads. Now we're going to do a whole bunch more with this. Okay, Ivan, if you don't, and you clicked Add View in here, and you finished the process of creating the index view, yeah, you'll have to create the view, and it will build the folder for you. So it's 5 to 2. I think we're due for a little break. So I'm going to stop the recording. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back at 2:05, and we're going to do a bunch more work with this. Okay? Let's take 10.